everybody to the DEI Leader Network for April. We are so excited to have you with us today to talk about employee resource groups and hopefully share a little bit of information with you and have a conversation about the ERGs. So my name is Elizabeth Kerwin. I'm a managing partner here at Diversity Works, and we created the DEI Leader Network because we found that the role of a DEI professional can often be a lonely one within an organization. So unless you're lucky enough to have a big team behind you, DEI leaders often shoulder an enormous amount of responsibility on a tough topic. And so we're here to create community and to provide some support for you. The network is intended to give DEI leaders and those interested in learning more a community to lean on and learn from. And we host this monthly live event every third Thursday and archive our events on our YouTube channel. And next slide. So just a little bit about Diversity Works. We are a women-owned and led firm, and we are really interested and focused on helping you maximize the return on investment with your DEI work. We really, we believe in really doing a diagnosis before we make recommendations. So we offer DEI assessments, and we've got a free version that we will share with you after this webinar in our follow-up email. And we really encourage you to take a look at that and see where you're performing well, where you might have some areas to improve. And we'd love to chat with you about how your goals and how you'd like to make progress on your DEI efforts. So like I mentioned, we think that investing in diversity, equity, inclusion is the right thing to do, smart thing to do, and more relevant than ever. In recent years, we've really seen the country trying to come to terms with some stark injustices in our society. And the murder of George Floyd really kind of kicked off this discussion, and it's led to a lot of attention from a wide variety of stakeholders. At the same time, we're seeing the country just become more diverse from a demographic perspective, and that trend is going to continue. And so we really want to be thinking strategically about this investment in inclusivity and equity so that workplaces can attract the most talented workforce and keep employees engaged so that they are be able to retain those employees. Focusing on your organization's value and how you manage your workforce and even how you spend your money is really critical for remaining competitive. And so we really see investing in DEI as a business imperative as well as an advantage for you. So when we look at diversity, equity, inclusion, our evaluation framework covers 15 different dimensions of diversity. We look at a number of strategic aspects of diversity, your internal performance, as well as external performance. So it's a real 360 view of diversity within an organization. And where employee resource groups fit into our framework is both in vision and values. It's a good way for you to express your diversity values within the organization to show employees that you have a commitment to ERGs and DEI. And it's also an employee engagement and wellness opportunity. So we really see this as a way to keep employees engaged, to improve retention and some other key metrics that you might have around your workforce. And I saw a note in the chat about being too small for an ERG. I think that there's kind of no magic number for how many employees you need to have before you can form them, but if there's any shared identity or connection between employees, then even an informal group is a good place to start. And Holly's going to talk a little bit more about the different types of employee resource groups that exist, and even in a small organization, I think in the informal networking You know, when my first job, I think our ERG was called Happy Hour, and we got together to create connections after work in that environment. So, you know, they're not all strategic and formal, but we do think it's important for employees to have those connections.
Great. Well, thank you, Elizabeth, for kicking us off. So we are here today to talk about employee resource groups. So probably the right place to start is with a shared definition. And, you know, the way we think about it is an employee-led group that fosters inclusion, celebrates diversity, but that is also aligned with the organization's mission, vision, and values. But obviously, if an organization doesn't have clearly stated vision and values, that's a critical part, not necessarily for the employees to solve, but a critical point for an ERG to be successful, right? So if you don't really understand the true north of the organization, it's hard for an ERG, obviously, to align to it. You know, companies started forming ERGs apparently as early as the 1960s, according to Working Mothers magazine. But Xerox actually says that they are the first, they created the first ERG for Black employees in 1970 and attributed a lot of their, the advancement and leadership roles at Xerox for Black employees to the creation of that group. The benefits are well documented. We're going to talk about them, and we're also going to talk about some of the potential risks associated with ERGs that we want you to be thoughtful about. But we are fans of employee resource groups, and we think that being intentional and thoughtful about your approach will make the process more likely to succeed. And as much as we like hearing ourselves talk, please chime in if you have a personal story, if we say something that resonates with you, and share your own experience. We'd like this to be a dialogue as much as possible. Just take yourself off mute and interrupt and ask a question. So there's a lot of labels for employee groups. Elizabeth's Happy Hour group might be the networking group, the less formal. And often ERGs evolve out of those informal groups. One of our clients based in Houston had a women's group that really was focused on those social interactions after work. But really, even in that model, it was the vice presidents, the female vice presidents that went to those events to mentor and coach and build relationships with younger women in the organization that served as the impetus for it. And they're in the process of translating and transforming that networking group into something a little more formal, like an employee resource group. On the other end of the spectrum is the business resource group, which is the employee resource group with much greater strategic focus. These are blurred lines. We know of groups that do all three of these components, but for the sake of today, we're going to try and stick to the employee resource group definition. So we have a poll, and Rachel, if you wouldn't mind launching the poll, we just want to know a little bit about your ERGs. So if you could take the poll, that'd be great. We'll just give people about 15 seconds to do that. Not a hard poll. You know, we see about 33%, 34% of companies have some sort of an ERG. So it'd be interesting to see where we land with this group. Well, that's pretty good. So let me end the poll and we'll share the result. Oh, people are still answering it. Anybody else? All right, we'll end it there. And let me share the results. So it looks like 55% have an ERG with an executive sponsor, which is fantastic. That's certainly a best practice. 10% have one, but without an executive sponsor. And we think that sponsorship is really critical. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And then about 35% do not have any ERGs. So clearly we're in a group that has higher than average ERG utilization at their companies. So that's exciting. So we definitely want to hear from you all about your experience there as well. So ERGs have been growing since since the 70s, but since 2011, we've seen, based on Diversity Inc.'s own research, that 29% of the people that have been awarded the Diversity Inc. top 10 to 38%, and then their top 50 from 23% to 36%. But like I said, overall, we see around that 30% have some form of networking group or ERG group. And the evidence is clear that companies with ERGs perform higher than companies without them. And there's great evidence that when companies adopt good DEI practices, of which ERGs is one, they outperform their competitors. Now, whether it's recruiting or retention, higher employee engagement, which can lead to higher productivity, ERGs can be an important component to improve the culture of the organization, and its purpose should be aligned with the company's financial goals to ensure that receives continued support and is successful in the eyes of the organization. So we want to highlight a couple different industries and how they're looking at their ERGs. So we took a look at a law firm, a technology firm, a bank, a construction company, and a television company, cable company, Comcast. So let's start with Baker McKenzie. Baker McKenzie is an absolutely enormous global law firm. So they're not just thinking about US ERGs, but they're thinking globally. And they have, a very long list of things that they do to advance equity and inclusion and diversity in their organization. But the one that I wanted to talk about today are inclusion circles. And that's probably the closest proxy to an ERG in terms of their language. And these circles are focused on women and ethnically underrepresented groups. They encourage dialogue and explore challenges and opportunities related to development and progression. They have also developed very formal mentorship programs between senior leaders to help coach and mentor women and ethnically underrepresented groups to advance in the organization. They're really doing some incredible work there, and I highly recommend, if you are part of a law practice, that you take a look at what they're doing. Intel is also an interesting example. Most of these companies are doing much more than what I've put on this slide. I just wanted to highlight a few things. And what I thought was interesting about Intel is that they have the Intel Latinx network, the ILN, which they really attribute to helping them achieve their workforce composition goals as an organization. But they coupled that with the Intel Hispanic Leadership Council. In 2006, Rick Echevarria became Intel's first Hispanic VP. He sponsored the formation of the Intel Hispanic Leadership Council for members to serve as leadership role models and champion Hispanic employees and initiatives. Through other employees, he understood his impact as the first Hispanic VP. And he was approached by others in the company, and they shared how seeing him in the VP position was inspiring, realizing that they could get there too. And so when this council was formed, he formalized that leadership role that he had assumed just by virtue of his promotion into something more formal. So I think the combination of those two groups is really interesting, and they reinforce each other. The way I learned about Rick Echevarria was that they had profiled him in their Hispanic Heritage Month, which tells you how you can also use your employee resource groups to reinforce your values through your communication channels, whether that's internal or external. The next one I want to talk about is Bank of America and their Disability Advocacy Network. And hopefully you're noticing that I'm also talking about the different types of groups as well in these different industries. Again, Bank of America has no shortage of different ERGs, but I wanted to talk about the Disability Advocacy Network because it focuses not only on supporting improving the accessibility and support and career development for B of A employees with disabilities, but it also supports employees with family members who might have disabilities, and connecting them with opportunities for professional growth and development. They also, one of the roles of this group is to help educate the other Bank of America employees and create that sense of empathy and understanding within the bank. Now, the DAN, as they call it, has grown by 70% since 2014 and now has 7,000 global members. The next industry I want to talk about is construction. This historically male-dominated, really not historically, this male-dominated field, Turner Construction Company stands out as an organization that is really trying to create a sense of inclusion for women. And they have the Women Impacting Turner group, which is called WIT, which I love. Maybe because my last name's Wittenberg, but more just because WIT is fun. And so what they've done is they've created this group to counter that that male domination in the field and the organization. And the group itself supports something called She Builds Summer Camp. And the purpose of that summer camp is to develop the next generation of women in construction. So they're not only supporting the women in their own organization, but they are working with community organizations to develop a pipeline for future leaders to increase the gender diversity and provide equal opportunities at their company. And last but not least, the television or cable company Comcast, our friends, for those of you that have attended some of our other webinars, you may remember Luna Eisenlaw, a partner of ours who does strategic communications. They actually worked with Comcast and the Out at Comcast ERG to launch a whole new channel of content around LGBTQI. This was an enormously successful brand differentiating offering for Comcast, and it came directly out of the Out at Comcast group. And we know that it increased brand loyalty, expanded the organization's audience, and it earned the company many awards for culture and editorial excellence. And so not only, again, did it support the internal employees, but it had a positive reputational impact and an increase in revenue.
Hey, Holly, before you move on, Leslie Reed Harrison had a question about the previous slide and the study about the composition of the ERGs. So they asked, does this study go into the makeup of these ERG groups?
I can send you, Elizabeth, if you write the name down, I will send the study along as part of the follow-up to this webinar.
Okay.
Great. Thank you for your question, though. So when Diversity Works talks about the business case for diversity and equity and inclusion, we think of it in terms of these four categories: talent, team performance, reputation, responsibility, and the bottom line. And ERGs certainly touch on each and every one of these when they're executed well. In terms of talent, we often talk about how the feelings of inclusion help with retention, and the existence of ERGs is increasingly important, especially to younger applicants for recruitment purposes. They're looking at company websites to see if they have strong commitments to diversity, equity, and inclusion, if they have ERGs, and that's becoming the basis, one of the factors in their decision-making process. According to a November 2020 survey, 52% of employees expressed a desire for improved development and growth opportunities within their organization. And we think ERGs can really be one of those mechanisms for that. They can become the basis for ongoing education and training centered around either the topic or the function. ERGs help with inclusion and diversity, and they allow employees from diverse backgrounds to connect over shared interests and provide opportunities for cross-cultural exchange. which is especially important given how much our society is changing now. Given the case studies before, what we saw is that we see greater, if you think about the out at Comcast, the creativity and innovation that came out of that, in terms of reputation, again, a very positive reputational impact, and then in terms of the bottom line, strong financial performance. So there was an article in the Washington Post, and the title was, "For younger job seekers, diversity and inclusion in the workplace aren't a preference, they're a requirement." And one of the surveys that they cited was from Glassdoor, and 76% of employees and job seekers said a diverse workforce was important when evaluating companies and job offers. Nearly half of Black and Hispanic employees and job seekers said they had quit a job after witnessing or experiencing discrimination at work. And 37% of employees and job seekers said they would apply to a company that had a negative satisfaction ratings among people of color. So when we think about this, again, this is a way for you to demonstrate your values, to incorporate things like your ERG program on your recruiting websites, whether it's Indeed, Glassdoor, LinkedIn, and really be thoughtful about how to put your best foot forward and tell your entire story of which ERGs, an ERG program may be one of them. So what are the different types of ERG groups? The ones we've been talking a lot about are the diversity and inclusion ones. These ERGs, the diversity inclusion ERGs, promote and support diversity and inclusion, and often include groups for women, people of color, LGBTQ+, and individuals with disabilities, perhaps veterans as well. In fact, the National Organization on Disability surveyed 59 Fortune 1000 company and found that 78% of them had at least one disability-focused ERG. So this tends to be what we think about, but we don't want to limit your thinking. Back to Elizabeth's point before about small organizations, you can have ERGs centered around career development, which is not limited by the size of your company. You can have social ERGs, which can foster a sense of community and might be centered around hobbies, such as sports, music, or cooking. You can have a health and wellness ERG, can be groups for fitness, mental health, mindfulness, community service. And that's, again, another opportunity by which you can reinforce your values by who your company's volunteers for, and the amount of time the company allows employees to do that volunteer work. Multicultural ERGs focus on celebrating and promoting different cultures and traditions within the workplace, including groups for employees from different countries, ethnicities, or religions. And then generational ERGs, as the name applies, might be groups for baby boomers, Gen Xers, millennials, Gen Z now, and work-life balance. And when we think about work-life balance, it could be any number of things, but often the topic is also about parental leave, remote work, and all of us are ephemeral goal of achieving work-life balance. If anybody figures that out, give me a call, by the way. But, one of the things we do want to caution you is that sometimes an ineffective ERG is worse than no ERG. And what does an ineffective ERG look like? It lacks executive support, which may take the form of having an executive assigned to meet regularly with the ERG leader, budget, clear objectives. The ERG itself might be led by someone who's not a great facilitator, maybe not very organized, doesn't dedicate the amount of time required to ensure the group's success. The ERG itself may communicate poorly. They may be accomplishing a lot, but if they don't continue to update the organization and the leadership team on those efforts, the ERG can fall short. if the ERG has poor attendance, or when the group does convene, there's limited participation, that can be very problematic. And if you don't set goals, you can't tell whether you're successful or not. And so how does that manifest? Well, you hear people talking about it's a waste of time, how it doesn't achieve anything. And one of the risks is that it's viewed solely as being performative, that the company's just doing it to, check it off the DEI list. In fact, McKinsey just in the last year or so issued a report saying that it's a force multiplier, ERG. So a positive ERG experience has a disproportionately high impact on an employee's engagement score. And a bad ERG experience has a disproportionately lower engagement score. So what that means is that not having an ERG or not participating in one is better than having a bad experience in one from an engagement score standpoint. Let me start by saying we are not attorneys, but we did see a video by a labor attorney by the name of Kristen Smith, and we thought she raised some very good considerations that we wanted to share with you. And we can send you the link, the original link to her information as well. But we want you to think about 3 legal issues that she raised in her work. One is about paying people for their time spent in the ERG. And she emphasizes specifically that you should be careful of hourly employees and decide how you're going to pay them. One 2016 study actually said that ERG leaders spent approximately 15% of their work week focused on ERG related work. And so imagine if you were a law firm and you have billable hours, you may need to decide how you're going to credit someone who is committed to the ERG and spending time on it, and not punishing them for really supporting what could be a critical initiative for the organization. Employee discrimination. Again, Attorney Smith says that you cannot limit membership. That is a form of discrimination. And so as much as these groups may be centered around a specific identity or shared interest, it's really important that anybody be able to join. And then the last piece is the National Labor Relations Act, and this prohibits employers from dominating or interfering with employee labor groups. And so you may not initially think of an ERG as a labor organization, but you may want to look to see what they're doing. And I would definitely consult your attorney, your in-house counsel, or if you don't have in-house counsel, outside counsel, to better understand that issue. So how to get started, and then we'll take some Q&A. Assemble a team and seek support. So if you've got an organic coalition of people that are interested in forming an ERG, then we suggest that group convene and seek support from leadership. That they then, write the goals of the group, develop a plan and a budget, and then, promote the group. Now, this is a very high level, 4 steps. And what we've done to thank you for joining us on this call is we have prepared a checklist. And I don't expect you to be able to read the very fine print here, but we'll send it after. But I just want to highlight some of the ideas here. We do believe that if you're going to roll out a program, you should begin by asking your employees what type of ERGs they want, what type of support they seek. So whether it is like the Bank of America DAN program, which is not just for employees with disabilities, but for employees with family members with disabilities, that might be a group that no one considered initially. Maybe you have a group of veterans that you weren't aware of. And so polling your employees is a really critical step as you think about this. as much as we know that many of these groups do form out of that informal coalition of shared interests, we do believe that having an executive to work on developing a thoughtful program and committing and allocating a budget is absolutely critical. Developing a mission statement and aligning it to the organization's objectives will ensure that the group continues to get leadership support, budget, and be as successful as possible. And, it could be the group goal could be to advance and create advancement and mentorship opportunities for people in the organization. It could be recruiting, and it could be employee engagement. So all of those things could be some of the goals, and it's just a short list. Then, the other opportunity is that you could select an ERG leader who has leadership potential, but maybe isn't in a leadership role right now. So imagine you've got a mid-level manager or an individual contributor even, and this could be a great opportunity for them to showcase their abilities to lead a group like this. So it could have internal advancement and development training opportunities as well. And then, we believe that you should set key performance indicators for the group and track those regularly, and then report them back on an ongoing basis, both to leadership and to the company, so they can see the results of all your hard work. So with that, we will take some questions. I will stop sharing so we can see your smiling faces. Please feel free to raise your hand. And
so I want to address Leslie Reed's question about what do you do when frontline staff want this kind of support and upper management is resistant. And I think that's a pretty common experience, is that there's a disconnect between the people who want the ERGs and the folks who need to bless them. And I think there's a couple of ways to think about it. If there is a if there is a frontline staff issue that upper management is trying to solve, such as, we want to improve retention, we want to increase productivity, we want to, improve profitability per employee. If there's something that they're trying to, improve in terms of that employee group, then an ERG might be a strategic solution to that problem that they're trying to solve. So, it's good if you can kind of make that direct connection between problem trying to solve and this being a solution, because those employees want it. Another thing you can do is just point out if a competitor is using ERGs and having success with them. Folks are pretty competitive when it comes to what the competition is doing. So if they're getting a reputational boost, whether that's positive press, whether they're getting awards for being good places to work, things like that, that can also be a little bit of an inspiration for folks. I think that there's a ton of data out there, and you can pull studies, but I feel like you really do need to be more direct than making the general argument, and just connect it directly to a problem that they're already trying to solve, if possible. But I think it's great that if employees are expressing a desire for something to be more engaged, you'd hope that upper management would see that as an opportunity to develop that workforce.
Yeah, I think that's right, especially about the competition, but also don't forget the changing demographics of the country and the fact that, in order to recruit the top talent, the country's demographics are just going to require you to have a more inclusive culture in order to have the highest performance. So to remain competitive in terms of the quality of the talent you can recruit and then retain, ERGs may just be normal course of business in the future. We certainly see an uptick already.
So
Brady,
other questions, you can go ahead and put them in the chat, or take yourself off mute. Either way.
any positive stories of an ERG at your company, or horror stories of an ERG at your company, and that somebody would like to share about why an ERG was successful or maybe struggled a little bit?
And Antoinette has a question. Is the employee engagement and wellness conversation expanding beyond just parental leave to flexible leave to address the caregiver's needs so many people are facing across all generations? I think that's true. I think that the pandemic really made a lot of folks take pause and evaluate employee wellness and engagement, and what the workplace looks like, and and what equitable benefits look like for folks. I think that a lot of inequities were kind of laid bare as a result of responding to the pandemic. So it's definitely a trend, and I think it's going to continue, and it does go beyond just that parental leave aspect. I think that's absolutely something that we're going to keep seeing. Christine is asking how many folks here have funding allocated to their DEI ERGs. So, but chime into the chat.
Yeah, Stacy, I think your question is really interesting about faith-based groups, and I just want to say that we are not attorneys, so we don't know if there would be any legal issues associated with that. I mean, I really genuinely don't know. It's an interesting question. But I think any shared interest, as long as it's aligned to the business objectives, stands a good chance to be successful. Another idea is to partner with a faith-based organization for some of your volunteering efforts, perhaps, instead of centering the actual employee group. Again, the employee discrimination comment that we made is really critical. So even if it were faith-based, it would need to be open to any employee, regardless of their faith.
And then Adrian's asking about some of the challenges and recommendations for ERGs focused on disability. One of the things that I'm always struck by with disabilities is that making accommodations for employees benefits everybody, and it's not just the employees seeking the accommodation. So the more conversations that we have about making workplaces accessible, the better the workplaces are for everyone, whether or not they have a disability. I think that I don't know that I've got any specific challenges in mind for forming those groups. If you've had some issues, getting one started or getting management support for one, I mean, that's certainly something that we can help you with. But sorry, now there's more in the chat. So let me pause.
Well, let me just say about the disability as so some disabilities are seen and some are unseen. So I would just caution you that if there is a group focused on employees with disabilities, that self-identification or identification of the disability not be required, and remind people that sometimes disabilities aren't visible. I'm on the board of a wonderful organization that provides shelter housing for the severely mentally ill. And so this is top of mind for me. But I do think there would be some sensitivities, especially around personal information there. But I think it's very easily navigated. And certainly if you have employees with family members with disabilities, the same applies. It's just not requiring people to divulge anything that they're not interested in divulging. And
I think Antoinette's further information is really just about how these functions are evolving and changing. So I think that's just that happens, right? We change is a constant. So the shifting from hybrid to in office or fully remote work. I mean, all of these things are impacting the way that we connect and engage as employees. So, definitely want to keep ERGs funded and focused on for strategic purposes.
And I got a private message talking about how do you make sure that ERGs aren't just a bitching session. And I just want to say, I think maybe perhaps Pollyanna thinking is that employees don't wake up and go to work saying, I'm going to do a terrible job today. And I think they want to like where they work. But to the question, which I think is a really important question, that is why you need to align to business objectives. It should not be about any single individual, but rather what that group can do to support other members of their employee community and support the organization's objectives. And so having clear goals, having strong leadership for those ERGs, and investing in those ERG leaders training if they need training to fill a gap in their skill set, whether it's meeting facilitation or planning, great opportunity to develop the next generation of leaders.
Yeah, and we also recommend that ERGs co-create a charter when they form, and that means that everybody is part of defining what the group's purpose is, how it will function, and so if you I think you can be very intentional in that charter creating process to say this is what we're here for, and we're not here for this, so that you can kind of keep people focused on task and adhering to the rules that you all created together.
And Stacia has a comment, but I just want to close out that to say you also have you need to have rules of the road for this group, right? So if issues are raised, especially if they're related to compliance issues or employee law, people need to know that if they raise an issue that they're being discriminated against, that the company can't just leave it in that group. It needs to be addressed. And so all of those things need to be thought through before the group is formed. And that's to protect the employee as much as the employer. They know that they're reporting essentially within that group, and you just want to be clear that that those things that are raised won't just sit in that group and fester. Stacia, thank you for coming off mute, and please share your question or your thoughts, your experience. What a beautiful picture too, by the way. I need a glamour shot.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I just wanted to come off the mute just to address that question that was just brought up, because I think what that question implies is that when employees that are from a marginalized group speak up, it's seen as bitching.
Oh, good
and
point.
I think people have to recognize that these employees, these groups don't have oftentimes a way to speak up and to get their voices heard. And so ERGs serve as that avenue for them. And so it's not bitching so much as it is raising concerns and raising what the experience is of these groups, when oftentimes historically there is not a platform for them to do so. And so we've had great success with our ERGs. And yes, they do speak up, and they do tell us how they feel, and we take that seriously. And to your point, we tie that to business objectives, because we understand the value of all talent within our organization. And we want to hear what this next generation is expecting of us as we, retire, as we go on. We've got to leave, our company in the hands of our next generation of leaders. And so we do have a lot of challenges with our leadership, just in terms, we do have leaders that, quite frankly, don't care or don't want to address some of these issues, but we do have a lot of leaders that do care and want to know what individuals think and what they need when they come into the workplace.
Thank you for that nuanced and great elaboration, because what I was thinking of when I saw that question was the ineffective ERG we touched on in the presentation, right? where people go and nothing happens when they raise these issues, right? So they raise the issues and it just sits there in that group. And so what I maybe didn't articulate correctly is there needs to be action, there need to be results, or people won't view that group as being effective. And so it's not the fact that people are raising the concerns, it's when those concerns just sit in that group and nothing changes. And that's more what I was trying to address, is how do you make sure that those issues that are raised are addressed, resolved, elevated, and reported back to the group and to the organization. Hopefully that's a little closer to what you were trying to say, but I really appreciate that as an important point that you made. And Janelle would like to add something as well. So I'd like Janelle to come off mute and share as well.
Yes, hi. I wanted just to echo in part Stacey's comments, which I thought were very timely and important. These groups are, like, as she stated, are also places where if these concerns aren't raised there, you have to question where they're being raised. They may be raised online, they may be spread through personal conversations. People who are interested in working for the company, they may be able to share it with them, how they feel about how they're being treated. And so there's a lot of information that can be gleaned from conversations where people are saying why they're dissatisfied, the issues they are having. And I think that just viewing them as bitching sessions can miss that. Very valuable information that you don't necessarily want to hear when people are on their way out, because it's more beneficial to hear it while they're there.
Right. And so in your experience, when issues are raised, this is for both Stacia and Janelle, when issues are raised, how do you ensure, in your experience, how have the ERGs resolved those issues to make sure that they do get addressed? And, you know, it may take some time for things to be resolved, but just would love for you to share your personal experiences.
Well, Stacey, if you'd like to go, or if I can go if you don't.
Yeah, I can say really quickly. So when we have a number of avenues for employees to speak to leadership, so ERG is one way. We have breakfast with leadership, so where our leaders will hold a breakfast, and then employees can come, and sometimes those have DEI topics, other times other topics. So we have a lot of ways for leaders to hear. We have obviously our Voice of the Employee program, so we have a whole program around that. And then once we get that, we analyze that qualitative and quantitative data, and we decide, okay, what as a company can we afford to do, from a budget standpoint, what's kind of quick wins, what, might be more long-term, and we build a strategy around that each year. And then us as the DEI team, we action on that and we pull in our partners. And then we have other ways. We have our talent management team. We embed DEI in a lot of different ways. So there's a number, it depends on the issue, but we certainly make sure that we kind of look at, from a budgetary standpoint, kind of short-term and long-term, what we can focus on.
Yeah, and that's a good reminder that ERGs are just one tool in your DEI toolkit, one part of your DEI governance. And happy to take any more questions. We do like to give people a few minutes before the end of the hour. So any more questions, please email me, holly@diversityworks.net. We've also got a wonderful session planned next month with a woman from Fertility IQ, which helps design benefits for women and who are trying to get pregnant, and also the former CHRO of Bacardi Rum. So they're going to talk about benefit design and how that can align to your strategy. Your DEI strategy. Forgive me, I'm having trouble here sharing again because I'm apparently really bad at this. So let me just do that. Elizabeth, can you see my screen?
I see your Outlook.
Oh, that's great. Let me stop sharing. I'm going to fire myself. We normally have a producer, but we didn't have one today, and we're clearly suffering as a result.
There you go.
So we're going to talk about designing benefits on May 18th. As many of you know, we have a monthly event on a different topic every third Thursday of the month at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. And just want to remind you, as Elizabeth mentioned at the beginning, we have a private LinkedIn group where we'd like you all to have conversations with each other about this topic or any topic. And we have a lot of content on our website. We will be sure to send out an email following this with a link to the video for anybody that you would like to share it with, and a copy of our checklist, which we touched on. So with that, we just want to thank everybody for joining us today. And we'd love to work with you and learn about what your organization is doing. There's nothing we like more than talking about DEI. So please reach out.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate
Thanks.
you joining us.
Have a
Thank
great
you.
day. Bye.